All right, Chris. Naomi now feels like she can hold the tag team titles because she earned them in a win tonight. Did you get any more? She and Bianca Belair beat Nia Jax and Candice LeRae, just for the record. Did you get any more clues tonight from the way that this played out? Who is responsible for Jade Cargill? I went through a couple like theories just watching the backstage promo before the match. Because for a second there, I thought they were talking about what good friends they were. It's like, what if they're both in on it together? Right. And that's kind of, we're saying, was it Jade, or I'm sorry, was it Belair, or was it Naomi? And it was actually both of them in cahoots because they're kind of playing up how long they've been friends and all of that. And then Naomi just like, I always got your back. I always got your back. I got your back forever. And she was laying it on so thick. I was like, well, that's the tell. And so now I'm kind of back to thinking Naomi. How about you? What do you think?
Man, I think it is. I'm thinking Naomi. One, my wife, right, who's much more casual fan, was like, oh, I feel like I can see this coming a mile away. So I was thinking Naomi, but then, are they going to play with our expectations, right? Are they doing a lot of misdirection? I tend not to think so. I think it's setting up a conflict between Naomi and Jade. I hadn't thought about Bianca being in on it, but, easing all the way back to Jade's first appearance in the Royal Rumble, they've never delivered on that promise of an epic showdown, right? So, I mean, if it turned out that Bianca was in on it, I'd be up for that. I'd like to see a heel turn for her. But as far as more clues tonight, not really. But I'm here for the intrigue.
Yeah, is there a third candidate that has crossed your mind as a like leading? I don't say leading candidate, but someone worthy of consideration, I guess, the best way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, back when just before War Games, when it happened, I mean, there was the talk of did Bayley do it, right? Did she get Jade Cargill out because she wanted to have her place in the cage? And I don't think that's where they're going. They feel weird to have Bayley make such a well-received face turn to then have it switch back so quickly. So I write her out. Is it somebody from the competing side that wanted to take out the powerhouse? Could it have been Nia Jax and Candice LeRae? Like, could it have been a hit job in that sense? That's another possibility that's crossed my mind. Yeah, where do you go with it?
Yeah. No, I'm kind of thinking it's Naomi. Or I think it's Naomi. I mean, I'm kind of just yeah. I mean, I'm open to other possibilities and them doing something that isn't just as obvious as it seems. But yeah, I mean, it makes the most sense for Naomi to go heel. Yeah. And it sets up a feud between them while Jade recovers. Yeah. Are you tired of the supposed teases of Tiffany Stratton cashing in? Or is it kind of fun? It's like, hey, it's a tool they play with. It's like a cat playing with a toy. It's like they're going to do it until they're bored with it. And WWE's not bored with it. Tiffany comes out with a briefcase. Cole's like, is she here to support Nia Jax? Or is she looking, because Jax was down on the mat when she came out, or is she looking for an opportunity? I think they're effectively playing up the is she on her side or is she waiting for an opportunity aspect of this. But the question is, are the fans who are watching, or the viewers watching, going, she's not going to cash in now. We know better. Let's just get to it. This is dragged on. So kind of where are you on this?
Well, I think the crowds are hungry for the cash in to happen, right? As far as my own personal take, yeah, I'm kind of ready for it to happen. Contrast this with Damian Priest's briefcase holding. Mm-hmm. Every time he came out to cash in, there was always some reason why it wouldn't happen story-wise. And it was fun. It was, you enjoyed seeing how frustrated he would get. What we've gotten with this one is a kind of power dynamic rather than circumstantial prevention, right? And I'm not sure that I buy the dynamic any longer between Nia Jax and Tiffany Stratton, right? And so
you don't buy it in the sense it's a poorly told story, or you think Tiffany has long ago stopped being loyal and she's just waiting for an opportunity to reveal it? What level are you?
Yeah. I mean, I think you can make the case with both, right? I think
right. That's why I ask. Yeah.
Yeah, I think story-wise, she's getting fed up with being second fiddle. She's getting fed up with Candice LeRae coming in and stealing her spotlight, right? So
and telling her to
go
prepare, stay away from the ring, go prepare for a celebration, open the champagne. And she's a party
planner.
Yeah.
I mean, that was like the ultimate insult, right? Be our waitress for the evening, right? I mean, how insulting. But I also I think the power dynamic between the two. Tiffany is so popular, she is so over, right? That it feels like she has eclipsed that kind of sidekick role. I just think, frankly, she's good enough to beat Nia Jax, right? She's shown that with her skill set, and so I'm ready for her just to capitalize on it. And I would hate to see her hold the briefcase for too long and have the crowd no longer care when she cashes it in.
Yeah, the crowd was chanting, at least.
Yeah.
I mean, cash it in, cash it in. I don't think WWE just added that after the fact. It was a pre-taped show from last week, so they could have. But either way, I think I saw some people chanting it, and it makes sense they would be chanting it, and that's a good sign now. But as you say, don't stretch it out. Like, people, there comes a point where fans will lose respect for you if you don't stand up for yourself. And if the feeling is Tiffany's biding her time, waiting for a moment, and she's not loyal to Nia Jax anymore, and that's the thing, they have to prevent. They don't want to book Tiffany right now where she seems like she is helping Nia Jax advance some sort of corrupt advancement of her career. Right. She can be ostensibly a cheerleader for her, but fans don't want to see her actually overtly helping her at this point because she's been so disrespectful to her and has sided with Candice over her, or stood by while Candice has been a mean girl to her. So They got to be careful. Now, some of this is there's two things in WWE. There's the ideal storyline length, and then there's the date when it's convenient to do the angle, to actually execute the conclusion, the climax, and those don't always line up. And WWE has to battle with that. I mean, some storylines should have peaked in early February, but you got to wait till April for WrestleMania because it's WrestleMania. So, and so in a sense, like, I give them a little bit of slack, but if you wait for the perfect moment, it's like you wait for the perfect moment for asking for a promotion. You can wait too long or do it too soon. I mean, so anyway, point made. Derek Mitchell in the chat just says it's funny to see the mean girl dynamic switch on Tiffany Stratton, clearing the heir apparent when Nia Jax sound like a Valley girl and Candice LeRae is being the small pixie chick. I am enjoying Candice LeRae getting this chance to be a mean girl and snotty and snide and I mean, it's just, I think she's good in this role, and man, she was just lost in the mix her entire time in the main roster. So we're Gargano and Ciampa, just kind of, a little legacy act, losing matches, patting themselves on the back, and fans going, whatever. They both are in a good spot, a better spot now. Chris, your thoughts on Candice?
Watching her walk out with Nia Jax tonight was awesome to see. I mean, I've been a fan since I've gotten back into WWE, which was right about the time her main roster push started to happen again, and then she got injured and was gone for a while. I'm enjoying the mean girl thing. We called it the Cruella de Vil, right? She's got this harsher makeup with harder lines. The presentation, she lost the wings tonight, right? I like where they're going with her character. I think she's entertaining to watch. I think she's good in the ring, so I'm glad to see her getting the spotlight that she deserves.
All right, let's pause. I want to talk about Chelsea Green's first promo as U.S. champion and stick with the women's division. Then we're going to get into the Grayson Waller effect, the 6-man tag, the Gargano Shelley match aforementioned, and the finish to that, and more, and just some of the recap stuff they did in the follow-up. This is a Wade Keller Pro Wrestling Post Show for Friday, December 20th, 2024. I am Wade Keller, host of the show. I'm the editor, publisher, and founder of the long-running Pro Wrestling Torch newsletter, as seen on the Netflix Mr. McMahon documentary multiple times, and the host of the Wade Keller Pro Wrestling Post Show and Wade Keller Pro Wrestling podcasts. This week, we had our flagship edition, and then also yesterday we put up a a special edition with the Tony Khan ROH media call for ROH Final Battle. We expect to have results of we're going to up our coverage of ROH now on PWTorch.com. I'm also the editor of that website, PWTorch.com. Check it out every day for commentary and news and flashbacks and live TV and PLE and pay-per-view coverage. We'll have a report on that ROH pay-per-view Saturday, probably by the time most of you are listening to this on the podcast side of things. Check that out. You can see how Jericho and Cardona did in the main event title match. So if you aren't subscribing to the Wade Keller Post Show or podcast, just search Wade Keller in your podcast app, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts on Android and iOS, and subscribe. While you're at it, search PW Torch to get the PW Torch Daily Cast. Different shows each day of the week, shows dedicated to specific promotions and themes, such as the PW Torch 90s Past Cast, where they look back at a Pro Wrestling Torch newsletter. I've been doing this a long time. The Pro Wrestling Torch newsletter 30 years ago to the week. Patrick
cool.
and Alex review that every little detail. Wade said this, oh my God, or he was right about this. I like that better. Pay-per-view coverage, backstage news, just reviewing this fascinating period that they were in late 94 as things start revving up from the awful early 90s period. And looking at my Torch Talk interviews with some of Pro Wrestling's biggest names way before there were podcasts. Torch Talk series was the only interview series that was going on with long-form interviews with people in the business speaking openly about it. And so check that out. Search PW Torch, subscribe for free, and you can get each of those shows, a different show each day of the week, as I said. But we are here to talk WWE Smackdown tonight. It was a pre-taped edition. They taped last week, had a lot of kind of filler and padding in it. People probably were watching this going, this feels a little bit different in terms of sense of urgency and star power. But still, we got some stuff to talk about, and we will do so here with my co-host, Christopher Adams, a PW Torch contributor. Welcome back, Chris. Good to have you here heading into the always discombobulating 2-week holiday stretch where it's like, what night of the week is there a wrestling show, and can I get away with watching it without my family or travel causing disruptions? Chris, welcome back.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure. This is the highlight of my Friday night, Wade. Thank you.
Awesome. Glad to hear that. Tell people about your contributions to PW Torch.
Yeah, so I do the hits and misses column for SmackDown that comes out usually Saturday afternoons, and I try to do something different than just reviewing. I try to reflect on things that I think really hit it out of the park. Right? I don't review every piece. I try to be more constructive than critical. But every now and then you got to be honest and you got to call a miss and miss when you see it. So check it out, hits and misses, and you can reach me at cadamsowj@gmail.com if you ever think I miss in what I have to say.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. All right. So if you would like to join us in the chat, if you're watching us live on YouTube, because we by the way, for those of you, most of you just listen to us on the podcast side of things, and keep doing that. Love that you do that. If you ever have time and it's convenient for you to join us live on our live stream, we show the recording of the podcast in video format on our YouTube channel at PW Torch. You're welcome to join us. Just search PW Torch in YouTube or go to the link in my TV reports at PWTorch.com. That'll take you right to the live stream. And if you are watching us live, thank you. Good to have you. And you can join us in the chat room. We'll keep an eye on the chat room and put up some chat comments. And you can do a super chat if you want to be almost guaranteed to be brought onto the show. We reserve discretion of whether it's guaranteed. But so far, don't be the first. Don't be the first to do a super chat and do something where I'm like, that's
you're gonna regret those words later on.
Yeah. So you can join us in the chat. You can also email us, and you don't have to watch us live to email us and be part of the show. WadeKellerPodcast@gmail.com. WadeKellerPodcast@gmail.com. When you're watching Raw, Dynamite, or SmackDown, just email that, and you might get your email on the show, even if you don't watch the show live on YouTube. And then finally, if you're a VIP member or Patreon supporter, you can be an exclusive video caller. You can turn your camera off and just be audio if you prefer. No problem there. We do that often. So yeah, you're always invited to do that. Go VIP if you're not. And then you can be one of the video callers. All right, so let's get back to reviewing SmackDown. I mentioned, I won't spend a lot of time on it, but we're talking about the women's division. Chelsea Green with Piper Niven, interviewed after her win. Chris, what stood out to you about Chelsea Green? She said, I've been working at this for, was it 10, 15 years?
Yeah.
And I always knew I would be an overnight sensation. Usually that's a babyface line, which is, it took me, people think I'm an overnight sensation, but I've been working hard for 10 years. And she kind of twisted that around and made it seem like she was bragging about taking 10 years to become an overnight sensation, which was a fun little twist. I'm looking forward to her in this role and getting more TV time. So tell me what you thought.
She rocks. I mean, I was torn between cheering for her or Michin, right, when it came to the match last week. And ultimately, I think the right person got the belt. Her work is unique, right? She embodies her character in ways that I don't think other people do. She seems to truly live it in a way, right? There's a exuberance to what she's doing. She gives herself totally over to this character that otherwise would seem negligible and impactless, if I can coin a word. So to see her get elevated like this, I think is amazing. I thought the match that they had at Saturday Night's Main Event was a good match, but I think the title reign itself that lies before Chelsea Green is a horizon of possibility, of incredible matches, good storytelling, and good humor. So I'm pumped. Yeah, if you can't tell, right?
Yeah, I mean, if somebody is asking in the chat our thoughts on the 3-hour Darrell Freeman. Thanks, Darrell. So now that the news is out that SmackDown's going to 3 hours, how do you feel about that? Do we get the longer stories from multiple people? I mean, I confirmed and reported it was going to 3 hours, quite a while ago. We're just waiting for WWE. I mean, it took them so long to announce it. I was like, well, maybe they've changed their mind, which would have been, good. There's good and bad to that, because I think 3 hours is too long for a wrestling show. It doesn't mean you can't have a good wrestling show, but you're committing to something that you can pull off, but can you pull it off 52 weeks of a year after year after year? And are there diminishing returns ultimately because fans start picking and choosing when they watch, because 3 hours is a big commitment and then people don't see all the content, whatever. I mean, we've been down that road with Raw, but there's a lot of TV rights fees, and cable is thirsty for hours of content that's fresh and new and can get them the carriage rights fees and more advertising dollars. So, I mean, WWE's doing it. And so Darrell says, do we get the longer stories for multiple people? We're going to get more Chelsea Green and Piper Niven. Like I didn't lament Raw going from 3 to 2 hours. I mean, it's just, I think my vote is 2 hour shows across the board. Mm-hmm. That said, I wasn't as upset to hear Raw was going back to 3 hours as I probably would have at other times during Raw's era, because when Raw went to 2 hours, it was like, oh, there's some things they were giving time to, we're going to miss out on. Right. So I am curious. WWE has record revenue. They can hire anybody they want and pay them enough to stay with them if they want to be there. They have a deep roster. I think they have a really strong creative team. And so, Chris, this means we're going to get more Chelsea Green and not just a little sprinkle, 2 out of 3 weeks. She's probably going to have significant segments regularly. I mean, others will too, for better or for worse. Grayson Waller, probably have more Grayson Waller effects, that kind of thing, for better or for worse. So what do you think of Chelsea getting more time, and then kind of more broadly, SmackDown going to 3 hours? I mean, until we get the transfer window sorted out, we really don't know what show someone's going to be on to get more TV time in terms of, because I mean, Gunther's staying on Raw, Logan Paul is going to go to Raw. Well, okay, they're going to get TV time no matter what show they're on and how long it is. Sure. The issue, what we don't know, is which show some of the mid-carders are going to get more time on, because they might be part of the transfer window. So I'm not spending a lot of time. Sorry for the random question. We're not going to spend a lot of time figuring out who's going to get more time on SmackDown or Raw specifically, and until we just know what the roster is, which we won't know till, first week of January. Once we do that, it's going to start to become clear. Oh, these mid-carders on SmackDown are likely to get a lot more time. So, Chris, your thoughts on Chelsea and who you're looking forward to seeing more of?
When I think of 3-hour shows for SmackDown, I think that they've got to bolster their women's division, certainly, in order to justify stretching it out. And I wonder if some of the people in NXT, like Julia, Stephanie Vaquer, if they're going to get called up earlier simply because they already have all the experience, are they going to pull from NXT, which will leave that show in its own sort of wasteland space? I felt the removal of that hour from Raw from 3 to 2 because of those stories that were getting ignored. Mm-hmm. So I'm excited for the possibility of having more substantial mid-card stories that don't feel like throwaways or squashes. So in that sense, I'm open to it. Maybe that's just because I'm a wrestling junkie, but right now I'm here for it. Ask me in a couple months after it switches over to 3 hours on Friday nights if I'm still as excited about it.
Right. Or not. Yeah. And I mean, it's a late night for people, but Raw ran till 11 Eastern for many years, and they're running Elimination Chamber at stadiums. I mean, they're as successful as they've ever been. Metrics always change. You can't really compare era to era. They're not going to do the type of numbers they did on Center's main event for NBC over the years. But it's different metrics. Back then, they weren't getting all these views on social media because there wasn't social media. So It's hard to compare era to era, but just objectively speaking, they're in a real good spot right now. A lot of people are paying big money to sit really far away from the ring to just be part of a WWE experience right now at a level that's never happened. Like, it was a big deal to run a stadium show once a year or once every few years, and now it's just like, oh, we're doing it every month. So, and we might do back-to-back Saturday, Sunday for even more events. So it's wild.
I mean, Wade, what do you make of that from a cultural perspective? Like, what is it that they're doing right now that is working so well for them that no one else is doing?
It's a really, really good question. And I don't have an answer. I actually, if I had, I mean, I don't think they know. I'll put it that way. Like, I don't think they could answer that question for you. Pro wrestling has always, if it's been promoted well, had the potential to grow as a form of entertainment. I think there's a lot of latent wrestling fans who are just waiting for a product that's compelling. And, I mean, there's a lot of people in no particular, I mean, some would cynically say, oh, the subtraction of John Cena is what led to the boom period. Like him being the dorky jorts guy being off TV. But, I mean, I think being on Fox helped. I mean, I think being on broadcast network TV opened up a whole new audience. I think WWE was very smart. George Barrios and Michelle Wilson talked about how we don't know if we're going to make money on social media. We don't really know what it's going to do for us. This was like 10 years, maybe more than 10 years. But everyone's in there, and we're going to do it and see what happens. And we know we got to do it. We don't know exactly what the end point is, but they're really out there in social media and put a lot of resources into it. And I think, short snippets of bombastic, colorful, exciting, charismatic people doing wild and crazy, violent and athletic things has grabbed a lot of people's attention. Yeah. There's also a consistency to WWE, and it can work against you if the product's poor and you're spread thin. But when you're doing well, like the Bloodline storyline, Cody and his story, and I mean, there's just a lot of things have gone well for them. And when that happens, but you're on 52 weeks a year, including during the pandemic, you sort of become part of people's lives. There's CBS Survivor or a reality show or a 13-week design show, whatever people are into, even politics. There's, kind of seasons when you pay attention and you don't. Wrestling's just always there for people. And so, but it's always been there during downtimes too. So it's like, that's not the only reason, but when it's good, you don't take a break and then lose track of it and don't come back to it. So, anyway, Derek Mitchell says Raw went 3 hours on the 1000th episode on July 23rd, 2012. WWE's content has been good, but 3 hours is a lot to ask regardless if for the diehard fan like myself. And then Standard Deviation said, I've become more engaged with both Raw and SmackDown since the move to 2 hours. I don't know if I will continue to watch these shows at 3 hours purely because of the time commitment. Something, too, that we don't know yet, because Netflix hasn't done a lot of live programming, is can people start 40 minutes or an hour in and kind of make it a 2 hour, 20-minute commitment and just speed through the stuff they don't care about in the commercials? Right. Or is Raw not going to be on demand on Netflix until after it ends or even the next day? And that's going to anger and frustrate people if they can't do what they're used to doing on the DVR, if they have, a DVR right, where they can digitally fast forward through things. And I don't know the answer to that yet. SmackDown should be the same. At 3 hours, you'll be able to start. You can start pretty close to an hour in and just speed through commercials and video packages if they don't interest you, and still make it a 2 hour event minus time to check your phone, let the dog out, run to the fridge. And so, yeah, different people are going to have different reactions to this, but Standard Deviation is an example, and his comment is an example of the risk, Chris, that there are going to be people who are like, I really like this 2 hour show. It fits my schedule. I don't want to commit my entire post-dinner, pre-bedtime evening to WWE twice a week, but I also don't want to follow a product that I can't follow immersively and see all the key stuff. And WWE's putting that at risk through, some would say, greed, or an excessive chasing of revenue that's out there in the short term, but with a long-term drawback.
I also got to think that there's some part of it was a contractual obligation with Comcast Universal, right? They were losing 3 hours of Raw content and 2 hours of NXT content, right? So getting an extra hour in their rights negotiations with WWE for SmackDown, to me, makes some sense, even if not from a creative perspective. Well,
let's. I want to ask the chat what you think has led to the boom period for WWE. What is, what are your theories on that? By the way, Standard Deviation says, yeah, we start 30 minutes late and fast forward through the ads. Don't say that too loud, or the advertisers get upset. Brock Bedingfield said 2 hours is enough for me. But Brock also said, somewhat ironically, I feel WWE is actually listening to what the fans want more than ever. And you know what? I mean, Vince McMahon always said, our live crowds are our focus group. We have live focus groups. I'm like, Home Depot does not have a live focus group. They just have, sales numbers, but they don't have people walking in and cheering and booing the new product placement of the
that would be
paint
awesome,
samples. Yeah, well, it'd be weird.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Standard Deviation adds, it's also the feeling of seeing a 3 hour show before it happens and just questioning whether I want to sit down for 3 hours. It feels different to me. So anyway, yeah. So chat, feel free to jump in with any more theories. Junaid jumps into the comment: will 2 3 hour shows be overkill for more fans than not? Even if it's exceptional TV, having 2 3 hour shows concurrently is unprecedented. Yeah, I mean, it's unprecedented. So we'll see how they do. I mean, it could be their downfall. I mean, there were people high up in AEW who voted against Collision being added to the lineup because they feared it was going to water down the creative team. Was going to water, but Tony Khan thought this is, the TV rights fees are there. I've got people say I have such a deep roster. He had confidence in his ability to book 2 shows, but there are people high up in who I've definitely heard pushed, voted against it, but Tony was pretty entrenched wanting to do it. So. We'll see. But on the other side of things, Goodfellas 1422 said, I'm in for 3 hours. I love it. But any viewers they might lose will probably increase their social media engagement as those people catching up, watching highlights and clips online. WWE's not making much money from social media. I mean, they brag about 13 trillion, views on whatever, but it's just not a lot, relatively speaking. They're having a boom period because of ticket prices and crowds and TV rights fees and streaming fees. So, that's where the money is. So social media is fine. Nobody really knows what it leads to. Like, does a clip on Saturday Night's Main Event of Kevin Owens attacking Cody being seen by, quadrillion people, how much does that add to viewership of Raw TV, of WWE TV the next week? There's no, I mean, maybe they do some internal some polling, but it's hard. I mean, who's going to say, who knows for sure? That's hard to gauge. So they see it as it doesn't hurt. We'll do it. It's more good than bad. But if you start having people going, I'm going to skip Raw and just watch social media highlights, that is not good for them on the next TV deal, and they have to be worried about that.
Yeah, the numbers, the social media thing's a fascinating one because there's no rhyme or reason which clips skyrocket in popularity. The clip of, I think it was CM Punk walking out of the cage with Roman Reigns, right?
Yeah, Roman.
Insane amount of views. And for what, right? I can't imagine that was a clip people were sending each other saying, turn on Peacock right now. Oh my God, So I'm not sure social media is any longer the barometer of interest that it used to be, right? Especially with the kind of bot culture that's out there right now.
I don't think having big numbers on social media is a problem, but I also don't. When I see the number, I don't think, oh, that's how many people sat and watched it. Like, right. It does scrolling past it count? It's just, I don't know. But yeah, it's not a bad thing. I just, when I see the number, I'm like, the number doesn't mean anything to me. Right. I mean, if you have a consistent way to measure it, relatively speaking, that clip did more than another clip. But if it just gets like propagated and recommended and to a bunch of people who are just like, what is this? And they move on. I mean, it's like, who cares? So anyway, some people chiming in on why they think there's a boom period. So we'll go to Mark, Derek, and Jade here. Mark Paschetti says, creative isn't at the week-to-week whim of a madman. Triple H has brought journey-based storytelling back. So that's, I think there's definite truth in that. Derek Mitchell says, I think the Bloodline story added a sense of realism with the family dynamic while also having co-stars Sami Zayn, Cody Rhodes, KO, Seth, Drew, and guest appearances like The Rock, Taker, Cena, and CM Punk. Bloodline storyline, I mean, I almost don't say that because it's so obviously part of the boom period. It almost goes without say. The Bloodline storyline on I said, being on broadcast Fox was part of it, but you had to have compelling content on Fox for that clearance to matter, and in reaching 2.5 million people, give or take, at the peak on a weekly basis was a lot more than, what they had been doing and what they're doing now. That Fox was helpful. Bloodline storyline, certainly compelling. Sami Zayn, I mean, we can talk about Cody, Punk coming back, but man, Sami Zayn and that story with the Bloodline, that stands out to me as like the top reason that WWE gained in popularity. I'll read one more thing, then throw to you, Chris. Junaid says, the reasons for the boom period are as follows: listening to the fans, wrestlers and announcers sounding more natural on promos, respecting fans' intelligence, having wholesome characters like Cody, and then he said it's one of two, but there's not a second one yet from Junaid. Sorry. So go ahead, Chris. What do you want to add?
The Bloodline and Sami Zayn, I think, is something that ought to be elevated. We turned wrestling on by accident or by happenstance, really, several years ago, 2 years ago. It was November of 2022. When all this was going on, right? And I think it was just after Sammy had become Sammy Uso, the honorary Uso, right? And we saw this, and my wife and I looked at each other after we watched it, and we thought, this is like psychodrama, right? They did something with the storytelling that was primal and human and touched deep layers, right? That was different than what had been done in professional wrestling, but it was also done so well. Right? And so for us, it was easy to be like, oh, if this is what wrestling is now, then yeah, we're into it. So the Bloodline, with looking back, I think it was the Bloodline that kept us going.
You when I say what happened, you are a singular focus group family that can give an answer. Junaid's part 2 is other reasons: showing mainstream media fans, famous people embracing WWE, celebrating sellouts, having relatable mid-management guys like Pierce and Aldis, shades of gray, wrestlers on journeys. And Durrell says the last 4 months of Raw, the storylines were real good, and it was filling those 3 hours well. When it went to 2 hours, stories kind of dropped off. So we're juggling 2 conversations here: the 2 hour versus 3 hour pros and cons, and then also the boom period. Okay, let's. I want to bring up, because we're talking about Janae just said Shade's great, but we had, and we're talking about the Bloodline, Drew McIntyre confronting Solo at the top of the show. Probably the top segment in terms of big stars interacting and kind of moving some things forward. The announcers talked about the history Drew and Solo have. They talked about Drew, a couple years ago with coming up short thanks to Solo Sikoa against Roman Reigns, and he's never been the same since. And Drew pulling from that history. I think this is not a top 10 reason, but it's emblematic of, I think, why WWE's in a better position than they had been is owning their history selectively. Sometimes you don't have to own all your history if it's counterproductive, but when it's productive, talk about what happened in the past, because when you talk about what happened in the past and you tie it in, you're telling people not only what happened in the past matters, but what's happening now will matter 2, 3, 4 years from now. And it adds a level of importance to what's happening. Everything feels less ephemeral and more permanent and important. So that's a positive. And here we have Drew, he's not coming out and just going, forget about all the past. Don't think too hard. Let me just yell at Solo. There's all this nuance of his character and what drove him mad. And Solo, we have common interests. My heart says attack you. My brain says not work together, but let's not get in each other's way. Drew does seem to be on a mission right now to carry himself like a top guy and be a top guy and be in the mix for the biggest matches that are out there. I thought it was another good performance from him tonight. I'm curious what you thought of Drew. And also Solo, who I still kind of waver on whether he has that inherent gravitas to look like he's at Drew's level or Roman's level. They're obviously leaning on him big going into the Netflix show for the match against Roman. But I still kind of waver on him. There's weeks where it's like good enough, and then other weeks where I'm like, it could be pulling things down a little bit. And I think he's trying hard and doing a good job. It's not like it's his fault. I just don't know if inherently he's at that point where he's coming across to me as like this guy who people are going to tune in to see.
I can't imagine anybody tunes in to see him, right? I mean, and yet I'll say that I think he's gotten better the last couple of weeks, right? I've never been a big fan of Solo Sikoa. I think my first time ever co-hosting, I said that, and a couple of people put me on blast for it. But lately, he's been good. But then when you see him, like you said, standing across from Drew McIntyre, who has his character dialed in, right? If there's anybody in WWE who knows who they are right now, it's Drew McIntyre, right? And you see him across the ring from Solo, and you see the difference in, and I don't want to say quality, but maybe the way that they are embodying their characters. One feels like a real expression of that person, and the other one feels like a really good performance. If you can tell the distinction.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, so that's where I came up with that tonight, even though I thought Solo is doing better. Seeing Drew in there just pointed it out. I'll also say on the Drew thing, they need to be careful in how they thread the needle with the logic for his character, because Solo was the one that screwed him out of the title at Clash of the Castle, right? Mm-hmm.
Yep.
It wasn't Roman, and so why would he ever be a fan of Solo's for trying to bring down Roman? They've got to make sure they don't back themselves into a storytelling corner, I think, on that note.
Yeah, and this segment seemed to be a way to say, let's not run from it. Let's hang a lantern on it. Let's draw attention to it. You're the one who cost me the WWE title at Clash of the Castle. Right. You're the one who caused my family pain and misery and suffering, but you're also the one who stood up to Roman Reigns. The rest of them acted tough, but they didn't take any action. Jimmy, Jay, Sammy. He said it. His heart says, jump him right now, but his head says they share the same goals. So what am I to do? Yep. He said, we each have a hit list to work through. He told Solo, take care of Roman Reigns for good. And when that business is finished, they'll finish their business. So Drew's not saying you're forgiven. Right. What he's saying to Solo is, Drew McIntyre is an intellectual heel. Very intellectual. And he's willing to share his thought process with viewers so they go on the ride with him. Or they understand why he's making the choices he's making, but also he's trying to thread the needle of, I want people to understand my motivations, but also boo me. And because the number one job of heel almost always is get the babyface over. If you're at, if the babyface is at your level. And Drew's working with babyfaces at his level. So
Yeah.
it's but I think he's doing it. I think ultimately he's finding a way to keep the fans against him, even while he comes across as a intellectual, thoughtful heel who's willing to explain his motivations.
Yeah.
Well, out in the open, he could have just walked up to Solo and said, "I've got my own reasons for doing it," but he's sharing it with the fans, and it makes for a good segment. I thought he did. I like them owning the past and explaining it, so we don't have to sit here on this show and go, "Wait a second,
yeah,
why is Drew hanging out with Solo and being all smiley with him?" You have a writing team, and this goes to what some people said in the comments here about Vince McMahon. They have a writing team now and a creative team led by Paul Levesque who honor. First of all, they remember the past, and then they believe it's important to talk about it and build it into the canon of what's happening now. Vince McMahon, his response, especially as he got older, and I mean, memories aren't sharp as you age. That's just, I mean, it declines in different ways. You got more to remember, and it's just the reality of the human arc. And I mean, there's times I'm like, I can't think of names, and it's like, if I was 22, I could have. So with Vince McMahon, I mean, it started happening and it got worse. And his defense mechanism was nobody cares. Nobody cares about that stuff. And, people's interpretation, and mine was too, is he's just plugging away week by week by week. He's not looking backwards. He openly said, I don't look backwards. I look forward. But when you don't look backwards, you stop. You kind of things that are in your short-term memory don't land in long-term memory. And things weren't landing in his long-term memory. And I mean, I could have named every single match in order on the first, 6 WrestleManias, and I can't do that anywhere close to that. The last 6, I mean, it's just so. With Vince, it got really bad, and the problem was he didn't ask for help. He had all the resources in the world to say, "All right, my strength isn't recalling some of these things. I tell these stories, I believe in them when I execute them week to week, but I don't remember all the details. Help me out here. Let's honor our viewers who do." And let's make it work. That wasn't Vince's collaborative, humble approach to things. So now we have a product where there are writers who are finally not having to sit there and just grit their teeth, as Vince says, what happened 3 years ago doesn't matter. No one remembers. Now they get to honor that and add it to canon. And I think it's leading to a product with more integrity. And I'll throw to you, Chris, after Derek Mitchell's coming here. It took 6 years for WWE to listen to the fans after Vince, Shane, and Stephanie and Triple H came down to Raw in 2018 saying they will listen to the audience. Standard Deviation says, I've never heard such pro-WWE sentiment until a couple months after Vince left. I'll just read Standard Deviation. Well, Goodfella added, Triple H doesn't insult the fans. He rides stories out. Sometimes he's on the nose too much, but I appreciate what he's done so far. And Standard Deviation says, I credit the boom to live event attendance to wider accessibility to SmackDown and primarily to Sami Zayn's longing to be accepted by the cool kids from November 2022 to February 2023. A very relatable story for a lot of people, a lot of wrestling fans. I also think deep down the last Vince McMahon was a scary time for a lot of fans who thought WWE would always be there, and there was a desire to see it survive without Vince. I'm more skeptical of that, Chris. I don't think people go, I'm going to spend my time watching around SmackDown because I want to see WWE survive and show that without Vince, it'll be fine. People make selfish choices with their time. There's no negative connotation to that. Just people act in their own self-interest. That's why cars don't crash into each other very often, because if you crash into someone else, you're going to crash your car, in addition to crashing theirs. That's why undivided highways, obviously there's people who don't drive distracted people and don't drive drunk and high and all that stuff. But when there's mutual destruction or, that doesn't happen. But fans aren't going to go, I'm going to waste a Friday night supporting WWE out for some cause. You have to have a good product. But I think there's still, even though I'm skeptical of that, there's a little something to that, which is you feel like you're supporting a product you can feel better about. It's been a rocky road. There's potholes and, a lot of, icy patches. But overall, I think people feel better about it. So, Chris, over to you. I threw a lot out.
Yeah. To touch on that, I think I agree with you, right? Nobody invests in WWE as a piece of entertainment because they are interested in the corporate structure surviving, right? Mm-hmm. But we invest in these stories because they touch us somehow and they grip us. So the reason why I think this consistency matters is because, as you said, it makes it feel like the stories matter. And if the stories matter, it makes us feel like we've spent our time well, right? And if they make us feel like
that's a really
we
good point.
wasted our time,
Yep.
then that's where the insult comes in,
Yep.
right? And so I'll give 6 hours a week, 3 on Monday and 3 on Friday, if it's good, makes sense, and doesn't insult me. And that's what I feel like is happening now. Is it's not an insulting product.
There's a reward loop.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a reward loop now. You feel what it goes to what I'm saying. When you introduce it, when you make sure today's canon includes what you spent your time watching 3 years ago, give or take. Now you're more likely to watch now because you feel like I'm watching something that actually will be part of history and not just forgotten about. So there's a reward loop. You pay attention, you get rewarded, and I actually, that's one of. I'm not saying it's a top 5 reason, but maybe it's not. Maybe it is that Vince McMahon felt fans just wanted to live in the moment, and it turns out fans want to be part of a continuum of something that matters and is respected and honored over time. Some comments on Drew here. Derek Mitchell says Michael Cole said Drew's breaking point started at Clash at the Castle, but he actually got better and added more complexity to his character than being a conquering hero in Scotland in 2022. Junaid says Drew is saying to Solo, "I'm smarter and you will get your ass kicked by me when I decide." But for now, our interests align because Roman is an evil manipulator, and the bigger goal is for me. He's a bigger goal for me than him. Definitely true. Darrell says we can say Drew is a perfect example for being someone who has added to the boom with this last year of taking advantage of the 3 hours, giving more time for stories, and he's helped the boom go. Drew McIntyre, part of it too. We'll get to that. We'll get to that also. Standard Deviation said, people who spent decades investing in WWE, so the uncertainty of the future of the product without Vince may have led to an increase in brand loyalty. So he's just kind of underlining and clarifying what he said. All right. Anything else you want to add on that, Chris?
No, No, I don't think I've got anything on that.
Yep. All right. Let's.
I did see something pop up. The Grayson Waller effect.
I don't want to do that yet. Hold on, Chris. Yeah, I'm actually pulling up a quote here about Drew from Junaid. Maybe this is me, but I feel like Drew came across as a bigger star than Solo tonight. Solo's getting more comfortable with his character and had good weeks, but I just don't quite believe him. And I think that's fair. A fair comment. I want to sneak that in there. I want to get to Grayson Waller effect, but I want to get to our video caller, Sean from Tennessee, first here, and maybe he wants to talk about that. We'll see. Definitely want to get into Braun Strowman. Hey, Sean. Good to talk to you. What's on your mind about SmackDown tonight? Good to see you.
It's good to see you guys. Well, just leading into this, the first thing I will say is I'm a big Notre Dame fan, so I'm watching the Notre Dame game right now, and I've been focused more on that tonight than I have SmackDown, just because of that. But the one segment I did for sure watch the full thing of was the Grayson Waller effect. And it was. I like Grayson Waller. Wade, I'm with you. I think Austin Theory, has down the line potential. This ain't doing it. The Braun stuff's not doing it. Carmelo, him being interactive with all this is not doing it. It was just, I don't know if there was anything good I can really say about it, really. It was the ones, I'm like, this is the one part I'm actually getting to watch of SmackDown. This is the one icky part of it. Is there anything good about it that you guys know about? Because I don't. It was rough.
Yeah.
It was rough.
Chris Johnson in the chat said, the one segment that stood out for me on this show was a Grayson Waller Braun Strowman segment. It was awful. Crowd was dead. The rest of the show was just maintenance. There was more than maintenance on this show. It wasn't blockbuster first run show, but at the same time, I've seen maintenance shows. This was not maintenance. This had some developments. Chris, go ahead. Talk about.
You can throw it to me.
Yes.
So
okay.
Yeah.
So as I saw the carpet being unrolled onto the canvas, right, and then remembered, I guess my brain wouldn't let me forget that we were going to have a Grayson Waller effect segment. I just kept thinking to myself, who is this actually for, right? Who enjoys these segments? They're not characters that appeal to children, right? So it's not like the kids are getting pumped to see Grayson Waller come out. And they're certainly not for the 18 to 35 demo, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm kind of with you, Sean. I'm ready for them to stop with the Grayson Waller effect. I really like Grayson Waller. I'd like him to sink his teeth into something.
Yeah.
But it just feels like it's for somebody, and I just don't know who it's for. Is my take.
I keep waiting to see evidence that Waller and Theory being together has been a good thing. Right. And I was like, well, if it's part of some arc, maybe it is. I mean, like, yeah. I mean, sometimes there's just two basketball players or two or hockey players who hockey players don't belong in the same line together. They're redundant. There's someone who's good at assists and someone who's good at being scrappy in front of the net, like an Eriksson Ek. And then there's somebody who's just great who's just a superstar, like Kaprizov. And then you have people who feed them. And like Waller and Theory just sort of feel like they're kind of bumping into each other. Like I want to see them be with someone where they're like Candice LeRae and Nia Jax or Tiffany and I. There's a contrast there. Even Gargano and Ciampa, like they don't feel like they're just two of the same person. Gargano's was this nice guy and Ciampa more intense, and now Gargano's the snide guy you just want to see get beat up, and Ciampa's the more intense, scary guy. With Theory and Waller, I just haven't seen a chemistry develop. The chemistry with them, and we saw it again here, is Theory being subservient to Waller. And the feeling is, well, is it sort of like Tiffany Stratton eventually going to stand up to Nia Jax? And it's like, I don't think they needed to rush into it, but I think we're way past the point where you think that was the master plan. This just feels like they've been put on the back burner and ignored and kind of creatively abandoned in a way. That said, I do not, as much as we talk about honoring history and, including everything in canon, I don't think Austin Theory losing a dark match at a TV event dooms him to never get over.
Right.
But it is telling that that's how management looks at him at the moment. But management is also smart enough to know we've had a lot of people who are stars do a lot of jobs on TV or get ignored for a while and then pushed again. It's not a positive. You have to overcome it. It can hurt. I mean, Big Show was doing jobs on TV, and then he was, main eventing, 3 years later, whatever the timeline was. It's not good, but it isn't. It's not. It's not a fate that you can't overcome. But I am just sort of looking at this, going, how is Waller better playing off a Theory? How is Theory better being big-footed by Waller? And I haven't seen it. I don't see them come on and go, this is going to be fun. I do think that I think that to a degree with Tiffany and Nia and Candice. I certainly think it with Piper Niven playing off of Chelsea Green. Miz and Karrion Kross is a fun example of someone bullying somebody else, and it's I think it's a good dynamic. Kross is rising occasion, and Miz is in a position I think he belongs in. I see nothing with Waller and Theory. I think they both have talent. Not doing a lot for me. And Waller going, hey, we can all work together, and Strowman going, no. Like, why did we have this segment? It's so so Braun can run backstage and chase out. I don't know. I mean,
they should have just broke up. If you're going to tease a breakup, just let them break up. I mean, if that's all you can do with them together, just have them break up and move on, do something different.
I have stock invested in Austin Theory argument. If you're trying to hold the stock and feel good about it, is they didn't break them up because when they break them up, they plan to push them both in a different way, and they're just not ready for that yet. Maybe 3-hour SmackDown, 3-hour Raw, there's more bandwidth, and they're like, all right, now we can tell that story. We didn't want to do it if we didn't have the bandwidth to tell that story. And, they're immersed in this. They're going to look and go, we don't have time to tell the story yet, so let's just kind of be in a holding pattern. It's like the plane flying over the airport until there's a place to land. That's kind of where I think Waller and Theory are. They're a plane flying over the airport, waiting for clearance that there's room for them. That doesn't mean the plane's going to crash or it's going to fly forever. It just means they're strategically waiting for a time to land this plane. It doesn't mean, there isn't danger of running out of fuel. Okay, I've extended the analogy enough. Chris, anything you want to add?
Just the visual of Theory not even having his own chair to sit down. It gives credence to what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
He was just there. And it feels like he has so much more to offer than just being a guy who's there.
Yes.
And so in that sense, watching it, you're like, man, he's getting paid well, I'm sure,
Yeah.
And Braun is just not funny. Like, he's just trying to do these jokes that just aren't funny. Nobody's laughing at him, dude. Like, I know you're trying. I mean, good on you for trying, but it ain't working.
Yeah. Derek Mitchell says, Wade, here's my NBA comparison. Waller and Theory pumping into each other is like Chris Webber and Juwan Howard during their Washington Bullets years. People thought that was going to happen with Rudy Gobert and Karl Anthony Towns, and it didn't. They were, had they not played a team that was tanking in the last game of the season, they would have been tied for the Western Conference Championship last year. And they ended up in one game out, but because the two teams had one game better than them. But I mean, they were leading the Western Conference the whole year, and just the schedule happened to lead to them playing a team that had something to play for in Phoenix, where the other two teams were against teams that were tanking for the draft. They literally, in a very, very competitive Western Division last year, played to the Western Conference Finals.
Right.
And no one thought they could play together. But the reason was because Karl Anthony Towns is a center, but he's a center who is one of the top 10, 15 three-point shooters in the league. And unlike Charles Barkley, who never watches the Wolves and says the same thing every time they're national TV, and now he says about the Knicks, Karl Anthony Towns shouldn't be shooting three-point shots, which is so stupid because he's one of the best three-point shooters in of this generation.
I love you, Charles.
Yeah, he's so. I mean, he doesn't watch the players he comments on, but they found a way to make it work, and it succeeded. And I'm going to go off on this. I was at the Knicks Wolves game last night.
Yes, Wade, about that.
One of my worst basketball experiences ever. What a letdown that was. And now I'm listening to the media reaction to this. We're trying to figure out what happened where they were up by 7 and had a 3-point shot in the air, and I'm like, we're going to be up by 10 in the first quarter, and then the 3-point shot didn't work, and then it was like a 30-5 run or something ridiculous after that. Yeah. But the reason we traded Towns isn't because we didn't want him. It's just he was a supermax player, and we were getting the whatever they call it, the second tier tax. And we have Anthony Edwards, and we're thinking, and we got Gobert, and he's willing to play for cheaper than Towns. And so, let's have flexibility to keep a couple other players who are really important. So there's a lot of complexity. The trade was made as part of a 5 or 6 year plan, not to be better this year. Nobody in the national media gets it. Going back to my analogy, Towns and Gobert worked together because they were very different kinds of centers. Towns is spreads the floor, and Gobert, he does not. But Gobert's an incredible defender, and Towns is an average defender. So, give or take. So, I'll tie this back in after my little Wolves rant because that still stings. The Theory and Waller are not Gobert and Towns. One of them doesn't have, even though they're both sort of, in a similar realm generically at this stage of their career, kind of known for doing some comedy and stuff like that and being mid-carders. It's not clear where one has a strength and the other has a different strength. They haven't figured that out at all, and they've had all this time. So where is this heading? It feels sort of like the Wyatt Six, creatively abandoned, holding pattern.
Right.
And maybe there's like some authors write a book, they don't know how many pages it's going to be. They know the first 5 chapters, they know the last chapter, but they have no idea how they're going to get there in the middle. That's what this feels like. I think they still have a last chapter in mind, but there's all this just filler chapters that is leading nowhere. And I don't know. I think we just spent more time on it, even subtracting my little Wolves rant. We spent more time thinking about it than I think WWE Creative has in the last year.
Yeah.
I mean, Theory, like I said, they obviously initially thought enough of Theory. Now, I can't remember. Was that when Triple H was there when Theory and Cena? That was before that, right? Was that before that, or was that right kind of in the beginning stages, I guess, we should say? Because they thought of something of Theory to have a match with Cena. They thought something of Theory. And then now Cena, again, I'll go off on a whole thing on Cena. I won't do that. But he ruined that in certain ways. And so the match was bad. And it was just like, after that, it was like, well, we don't think highly of this guy. And it's not all his fault, I mean, he has upside. You could tell not just the physique and the look he has, but he's good in the ring. He's I think he's a good talker. I really do. I just think when you're with Waller, a guy like that, you're not going to get a lot of talk time because Waller's very charismatic and has a lot of, stuff that's very compelling about him that they can tell. They just haven't, again, Wade, they haven't done it yet. They don't want to yet. They're just not ready to do anything with them right now. But I hope it gets better for them, and I think it still can. I mean, again, with 3 hours, I was just going to say with the 3 hours, the positives are, like we've said, the stories can gel better. A lot of this mid-card talent that we think has been underutilized for a long time, there's a chance to tell some stories with these mid-card wrestlers, with these Dakota Kais and with these, some of these people that we think have a lot of talent and we haven't really got to see. They've been with factions. They've been, and stuff that you just kind of they're out of eye a little bit, and then now they get a chance to kind of show really what they can do, and I think that's good. And there's those are the advantages of 3 hours. The downtime is I just don't have a lot of time in a day. It's hard for me to watch 3 hours of Raw and 3 hours of SmackDown and 2 hours of NXT and all this. I just don't have. I have a job. I have a life. I love wrestling.
It's my job, and I
too.
don't have time for it.
Right.
It is my job, and I don't have time for it. Like it's a lot. Yeah.
But I will say,
yeah.
since I didn't get to see a lot of the show, I won't really comment a lot. But I wanted to say, because I won't be on, and you won't be on, I don't think, until after Christmas Day itself. Wade, I've said it before. I don't want to get on a tangent, but I appreciate what you do. I've heard you were the first one I really got to hear talk about wrestling, and then I caught on to the Torch and what you do, what you've done with all of PWTorch. I appreciate what you do. And then I got to meet, talk to Jason from you being on with Jason all the time. And so I've been privileged to be on some of his shows. I'm always glad to be on here. I appreciate the platform you've given us VIP members and us people to talk about wrestling that we love and enjoy. And Chris, like I said, you the same, and Greg and Mike, who was in the chat a minute ago, and all the people, all the co-hosts, all the people that keep the torch going. What you've done to start it for over 30 years. I appreciate it. Merry Christmas to all you guys out there, all the people in the chat. I love talking with people in the chat. Again, Zach and Tyler, you help them kind of move on to their own platform. You were the one to help them do that. And so I know they appreciate it, and I know I appreciate it. So I just want to
the Wade Keller coaching tree.
Yeah.
I'm always happy when people move on, and I mean, it's great when people stay around forever too. Stay with me for a long time too. Sean Radican, Greg Parks, long time. Right. Long time contributors among others. But it's cool when people like I got this itch. I want to do this, or I got this opportunity. I want to try this, and I can do more. So, Sean, thank you. Really appreciate your kind comments. Have Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Hopefully, we'll talk to you soon. Obviously, things really kick up. With Fight for the Fallen January 1st, and there's a pay-per-view between now and then that AEW is promoting, and then NXT with the theme show and Netflix and Max. It's I mean, deep breath, people. Yeah, a lot going on. Thanks, Sean.
Wrestling's in a really good spot, and like I said, I'll be a VIP member for the end of time as far as I can see, because I mean, nothing, you give out so much content that you can't even keep up with it. There's just so much great stuff. Alex McDonald, get your butt back on this show soon too, man. Where are you at all these months? Get the heck back, man.
It's a college football season, and the Tampa Bay Bucks, and SmackDown moving off of broadcast. Not a lot of reasons, but we'll get them on soon.
All right, appreciate you guys. Have a great night.
Thanks.
Merry Christmas.
Thanks, Sean. All right, a couple other chats. First of all, Sean mentioned Mike Myers. Mike Myers said, I've been starting a Fly Forever chant on recent commercial flights. Mike, it's always good to get you to chime in. Thanks for stopping by. Great stuff. That'd be actually really fun.
That would be.
Yeah. There'd be people going, what? No. And like literalists who would be like, stop it. As far as Theory and Waller go, Brock Benningfield says, how many lines did Theory have? 2 max. JC Scooby says Theory and Waller belong in NXT. Yeah, I mean, or they shouldn't be together because they're sort of redundant. They need to move on. And I'm not against like Austin Theory going to NXT and doing, because sort of rehabbing himself there a little bit. Getting it's like, all the sports analogies. Sometimes you send a goaltender or a player in the NHL down to the minor leagues or a pitcher just to get their confidence back.
Yeah. It seems like Waller needs a push and Theory needs a reset.
Theory needs a what?
A reset.
Yep. I think that's true. Let's see. Okay. But to the segment itself, Brock Benningfield says Waller isn't interesting, and Strowman is even less interesting, and Theory is almost non-existent. And Chris Johnson says, I usually don't react this poorly to Grayson Waller effect segments. I think Braun was just dreadful. Braun is not the most dynamic personality. I mean, I've said, I've heard when Braun corners people backstage and starts talking, they're just like, how do I get out of this? He's not, I mean, I mean, it's a bad person. I'm just saying, like, you're not. From what I hear, you're not missing out on this really dynamic, real life Braun Strowman in terms of how his character's not dumbed down. It's just he just kind of is blah. So you have to use them. You have to use them strategically. But I mean, the Carmelo Hayes thing. It's fine. Yeah. Talk about that, Chris.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what they're going for with that. I mean, it's David and Goliath, kind of story, of course.
reverse, yeah.
Right.
Well, I don't know if reverse, but yeah, wrestling wise.
But yeah, it feels like they don't know what they want to do with Carmelo, and so having him have this match is gives him something visually interesting for us at home to do, but I just don't see them as having any kind of chemistry the way Hayes and Andrade did, right? And that's why for me it's a letdown to go from this amazing feud to something that feels like it's two dudes who don't really want to be dancing with one another.
I mean, yeah. I mean, Braun is going to be protected to an extent. They did the same thing again this week, which is, SmackDown got Braun. What a big signing. This is huge. And it's literally he's big, but I mean,
right.
If you're gonna strip SmackDown of all its top talent and go, but at least we got Braun, it's like, people aren't gonna buy that line at all.
Work.
But Carmelo is being used in a very specific way, and he's getting TV time, and he's getting paychecks, and he's getting to be that, sort of pesky, annoying, agitating heel who a certain part of the WWE audience that they're attracting, a big mainstream audience, are going to kind of delight in seeing him get showing up. But you got to give him an advantage, even if it's, this sort of, sneaky, nefarious, whatever, throw a banana peel under Braun's feet type advantage. You got to do it so that Braun has a reason for revenge. And that's what this week was all about. I mean, this wasn't bad booking. You can say, I wish Carmelo Hayes was treated like AEW treats Will Ospreay. I don't know. But that's not the business WWE. Well, that's an overstatement. You know what I mean? Like, I want to be treated as a serious, good athlete. And that's how WWE Creative says. Well, we don't push people because they're young and athletic and have had good matches. That's a loser's booking mentality, they would say, about AEW. And we had a whole conversation Wednesday on the Dynamite Post show. It's like, AEW's not going to survive by saying Kenny Omega's the best bout machine. Kenny Omega's going to make a difference in 2025 if you can get people to care about Kenny Omega.
Right.
And other than the people who are obsessing over 5 and 6 and 7 star ratings and that nonsense, and it is nonsense when it comes to trying to draw audiences at a major league national level, if they don't get past that, Kenny's not going to be the draw he could be. And so, yes, I'm Carmelo Hayes they see something in him because he's on the main roster. He's getting TV time. He's not on a winning streak. He's not on the verge of winning a secondary title, much less a world title. But they clearly see something in him by giving them. This doesn't come across to me as we're going to embarrass him and humiliate him and then cut him. This comes across as we see him in a certain role that he's good at. Braun Strowman's not a top guy either, but it's just a little mid-card thing to fill time on, frankly, kind of a little bit of an off week for them going into the holidays, and they're just sort of, filling time until they get to Netflix and 2025. Now, all that said, this does define him down a bit. I mean, if you were hoping he'd be the next AJ Styles or, whatever, but it's like with Austin, there's plenty of time to have a moment that changes the narrative about him.
Yeah.
And he can be immature, and WWE can tell a story that now he's grown up, he's matured, he's learned his lessons, he's got a better attitude, he's not as cocky, and then suddenly he'll have his good matches will matter as a babyface. But they're not going to say, he has good matches and people are sad he's jobbing and playing, a Roadrunner Wile E. Coyote thing with Braun.
Right.
They're not going to worry that people are critical of that. That's how they fill their TV time, is having an agitating heel try to get the big babyface to slip on a banana peel and whatever, and that's what they're doing.
I mean, do you think they've handled Hayes the right way to position him to grow into the way they want him to grow?
I think they think he's doing a good job at what they're asking him to do.
Yeah.
I can't read their mind about where they want him to be in 3 years. But I think right now they look around and they're just like, I keep using sports analogies, but like, and I use this analogy with AW a lot. AW should have 5 starters. An NBA team has 5 starters and like 2 to 4 people off the bench who get significant minutes. And when WWE looks at who they're pushing, Carmelo Hayes is not a starter and he's not a significant bench player. That they don't need him to be that. So he is a supplementary act right now who they value enough to give time on television, but he's not a top guy. Not everybody can be a top guy. Yeah. If everybody gets the push that their ability to have good athletic matches, if everybody who has the ability to have good athletic matches got the push that they deserved on that standard, you would end up with AEW.
Sure.
40 guys who just get TV time sort of interchangeably, not with a lot of momentum. Some get sent to ROH, some are lost on Collision, others on Rampage, some you see 1 out of 4 weeks on Dynamite. But there's no sense of who is this show about. And WWE makes hard choices. Every NBA team makes a hard choice. There's very, very talented people in the NFL, NBA, and NHL riding the bench. You know, there's people in the NHL on the 4th line who deserve more ice time, but there's somebody better than them at their position ahead of them, or they're young and they have a lot to learn. So he's going to be fine if he deserves to be fine, but this is not like, who do you want to get less TV time than Carmelo Hayes that realistically fits the formula that WWE uses? Because WWE's not about packing their shows with as much good wrestling with generic wrestlers who don't have a bond with the audience and a journey and a purpose. That's not the business they're in. AEW is sort of in that business. That's Tony Khan's mentality more so than WWE. Let's pack the shows with good matches. WWE thinks the Grayson Waller effect, as crappy as it was tonight, is part of their formula more than just throwing wrestlers out there to have generically good matches. That said, they kind of did that with Andrade. And I mean, they've done that, but it's in a certain dose and it's not always.
Okay, yeah, I can buy that. At the same time, you know, thinking about the opening match that we had, the 6-man tag, right? Wasn't that the opening match tonight? That one did, to me, have a feeling of let's put some people together for an inconsequential or less consequential bit of storytelling. And I found it an odd way to open the show. Right. And for me, the question came, is this a downgrade of the Bloodline into this sort of mid-card role, or is this elevating people like Andrade and Apollo Crews up into this main story? And that's one where I'm not quite sure where they're going with it. Yeah.
So when I watched this match, I thought 3 weeks ago, the writing team, give or take, sat down and said, all right, we're doing a double taping. And we have this array of talent, and we've got Andrade and Knight to take on 3 members of the Bloodline. We need a 3rd person. We'll have Apollo Crews get beat up at the security checkpoint. So he'll be the 3rd guy. He'll be the one who does the job, and we'll fill 20 minutes of TV on a week when we're worried more about Christmas shopping than anything else. This was just. We got 52 weeks of TV to fill a year, and our lowest priority TV show is the Friday before Christmas of a pre-tape show. But we want to give Solo a little mic time. We want to let Jacob Fatu look like Jacob Fatu for a minute or two. Yeah. And we're going to have them get a decisive win and go from there. I mean, it's not a squash match, but it was a showcase match for the Bloodline. But they didn't want to bury LA Knight and Andrade, so that's where Apollo Crews comes in. And it's fine. I mean, it's like not every single segment on SmackDown and Raw is going to be, it's going to feel, Seth Rollins and CM Punk going at each other in some sort of memorable segment. So I just looked at this as a few weeks ago, they said, how are we going to fill this pre-tape show? And they said, let's tell a little story with Bloodline beating up LA Knight. Andrade and Apollo come for the save. They get beat down. We do a quick 6-man tag. That check. We got 20 minutes of a 2-hour show filled.
And here's what's wild. You just said something that is stunning, right? We know that this pre-tape show is, as you said, the least important show. It's the show before Christmas. It's pre-taped, and yet it was still a pretty compelling watch, right?
Yeah.
And that's that alchemy that's going on with WWE. Is we know it was pre-taped. I knew how they were going to cut in the features that they didn't have ready for Saturday Night's Main Event. I knew it, and yet we still watched it and had a good time. So there's something to it, right? I just wanted to point that out because, as you said, the least important show still eminently watchable.
Yeah, and my attention span is not so damaged that I can't watch a 6-man tag on SmackDown with a top heel act that's clearly just, it went, I think, 18 minutes.
Yeah.
I
had a good time with it.
It had 2 commercial breaks. It's just, or I guess it probably went closer to 15 minutes. It served its little purpose. All right. Let me get to a couple other things about Carmelo in the chat, and then I want to get to Jason D from Australia, who's ready to join us. Good fella 1422 says, what happened? They were leaning towards turning on each other, Grayson, Waller, and Austin Theory, and then it just sort of stopped. Derek Mitchell said, when you have an ensemble cast like SmackDown, you're going to have elements of stars who are not watchable, and the Grayson Waller effect. And I feel awful for Carmelo. I don't think you should feel awful for Carmelo. It's not bearing him to say he doesn't deserve better. It's just, this is how it sometimes goes. They've chosen to give him significant TV time over 200 other wrestlers who could be in this spot. Who is he going to get a bigger push than? Who's getting a bigger push than him? Like, make your case to demote somebody in a way that fits the WWE storyline, which isn't, we're just going to have, and I'm enjoying the Continental Classic, but WWE's not going to do a Continental Classic where it's like, we just want to get a bunch of good round-robin matches in where Carmelo's having the best match he can against a bunch of our other mid-carders and upper guys. That's not the business they're in. They're unabashedly not in that business, and that's why they're selling out stadiums and not running in 2,000-seat buildings this weekend. So he's fine. You don't have to feel sorry for him. What did you expect? You honestly expected him to get a Goldberg push or a John? I mean, it's okay. He'll be fine. Not everybody gets pushed hard right away.
Guarantee you he's making more money than me.
And maybe he's lamenting it, but that would be a sign of lacking maturity or overconfidence and not understanding the formula in the lay of the land with WWE. He is in a role that, he was a number one. The story with him is he's a number one draft pick who has come up short. He has been competitive at times, and now he's playing a foil for Braun Strowman in a way where they literally look around and go, Braun Strowman is a type of wrestler on our roster that we like to have. And we need somebody like Carmelo to be the agitating heel opposite him. Let's look at the lay of the land. Who's going to be that person? And they didn't choose Grayson Waller. They chose Carmelo Hayes. And you can go, well, I wish they chose Grayson. But Carmelo's getting significant TV time and building a history with the audience. I get if you wanted him to be pushed into the world title picture, but that's just frankly naive to think that he would be when you look at the lay of the land. They have too many people who they're pushing right now. So he is a supporting player. He is that he's that mid, he's that extend the first round pick analogy. He's the number 10 pick in the draft a year or two ago, who's on a good team, and he's not going to get a lot of good minutes, but he's getting some minutes, and don't feel sorry for him. And Brock Benningfield just said the Waller effect definitely felt like holiday show filler. No question about that. And Standard Deviation says, yes, that's an opportunity cost. There is an opportunity cost to every push. That's the thing. You got to make your case. Who gets less time? You see that all the time in sports. Who gets less ice time, less field time, less court time? If your favorite player who's in his second, third year and hasn't proven anything, who gets fewer minutes? Somebody getting paid 20 times more than him who's been in an all-star game and doesn't just do flashy dunks, but actually can play defense and has a really good plus-minus. There's all kinds of factors that go into it. All right, let's get to Jason D from Australia. Jason, welcome. Good to hear from you. What's on your mind about SmackDown tonight?
Thanks, Wade, and thanks, Chris. Wade,
sure.
I'll pretty much agree with everything you've just said. So regarding Carmelo Hayes, pretty much. To put it simply, you can imagine Triple H or the team saying to Carmelo, listen, you're going to be with the company for 10 plus years. It's 52 weeks a year's worth of programming that we have to put together. We're establishing you as a character, as a heel. Eventually, you are going to make money for us as a babyface with your flashy moves, and we know that you can cut a promo and you have the whole him thing going and all the rest of it. people just got to have patience, like you said. There's only so many times you can showcase someone or spotlight someone, and they're going to obviously tell a story with him. And like you said, Wade, he was the number 1 pick, and he's already had 2 matches with Cody Rhodes.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? 2, and he's under 30. So what else are you going to do with him? Right now, they're just establishing him. He'll be fine. Carmelo Hayes is in a good position. They're just telling a story with him right now and just getting him established and giving him TV time. In relation to Austin
real quick, Jason, even Sean from Tennessee, Sean Plitcha, says Carmelo just didn't need to lose to Cody right away, but I think they thought it helped. It set the tone for a story. He's a first-round draft pick who's cocky and isn't as good as he got drafted, and that's a sports story. I mean, Sean, I think they weren't thinking it was helping. I think they thought they were telling a very specific story, and they have succeeded in telling it, which is there's this brash, cocky guy who thinks he's better than he is at this point because he got drafted high, and he's, you know, they played that up. He was playing to the camera when he should have been seizing the opportunity. The announcers called him out on it. They're telling a deliberate story about something that reflects how people are in real life, and it's more of a story than Austin Theory has right now. You know, so
well,
you know, not every young athletic guy capable of a good match gets a push that people who are fans of theirs want. But I think Austin. I mean, I'm not saying Austin Theory wants to be where Carmelo Hayes is, but at one point Austin Theory was, and now he's nowhere. And so maybe Carmelo, this is a stepping stone to get him somewhere else. Go ahead, Jason. Sorry.
Well, you can just tell that. Look, eventually one day there will be Carmelo Hayes will tag team with Cody Rhodes. Like there's going to be there'll be either a Smackdown or Raw where Cody Rhodes will team up with Carmelo Hayes. I mean, you can see it happening, and Carmelo will get the pin. Like they will go to that will when he first came in, he had a couple of matches with Rhodes. Like you can tell that's going to be a long-term story that they're going to refer back to. Carmelo Hayes will be in a good position. And if you are going to lose to anyone, you might as well lose to Cody Rhodes, the current champion, right? So I believe he's in a very good position. As far as Austin Theory is concerned, I agree with you, Wade. I've got stock in him, and I think he summed it up beautifully. They're in a holding pattern with him. We haven't seen Theory and Waller on TV in a while. Eventually, Austin Theory is going to turn babyface against Waller. He's going to get tired of Waller undermining him and bigfooting him, and it's going to lead to Austin Theory sticking up to Waller, and the crowd will get behind him. But I mentioned this before, the final bit of getting Austin Theory over that hump and as a cheered babyface, I believe there will be a segment backstage coming up during John Cena's final year where Cena just comes up to Theory and says, 2 years ago, I said that I didn't believe anything that you said and I didn't believe in you. Well, I can tell you right now, I believe in this Austin Theory. Because Cena, I think a lot of fans still have in their mind Austin Theory getting run down by Cena, where Cena really, emasculated him. To come full circle, once Theory turns babyface and shows that he actually believes in something, Cena will then reinforce that. So again, I think they see enough in Austin Theory. He's young, that he'll be fine too. So I got no issues with Theory and Carmelo Hayes because I can see, long-term potential for them. Now, in relation to more directly tonight with DIY, my only concern for them, Wade and Chris, I don't know if you picked up on this, they're not running into this type of trap where they're deliberately fooling the audience at home through these backstage segments. So they're acknowledging that the TV camera's on them, therefore we're going to pretend to do something, but we're going to do something different in the ring. So Johnny Gargano went out of his way to say to Tommaso Ciampa, you stay here, and he said it, quite a few times. And then when Tommaso Ciampa came to the ring to interfere, Gargano made it seem like, oh yeah, we fooled you all. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure I like that form of storytelling because now you're being inconsistent. Are they acknowledging that the camera's backstage and they're deliberately trying to fool the audience? And they're acknowledging that Motor City Machine Guns are watching that segment too? Because sometimes it's like they acknowledge the camera's there and other times they don't with all the wrestlers. So I don't know if they want to go down that path. Do you kind of pick up on that too?
Interesting. Yeah, it's a good Jason from Australia observation that others wouldn't think to bring up. I think they knew the cameras were on them, and I think it's up for interpretation. Did Gargano mean it when he said it? And then when he got in trouble or there was an opportunity, Ciampa knew he said it, but I know what's best for him and us. I'm going to come out anyway. Or did he say it because he wanted to lull Saban and Shelley into saying, Saban, you stay back, and sticking to it. So I mean, I think it can work on a number of levels. I don't think it feels like a violation of they said it thinking they weren't on TV, and then they did the opposite. To me, it seems pretty straightforward that it's a couple options. They knowingly said it in front of the camera with a plan, thinking, well, this will lull Saban into just wandering off and not paying attention, or not having his guard down, or they meant it and changed their mind when things got rough. What do you think, Chris?
I mean, I tend to think that the easiest explanation is the one that makes the most sense, right? Is the one that is probably more correct. And so when I saw them saying, don't come out, Johnny, to Tommaso, I didn't see it as subterfuge. I just assumed once I saw Tommaso come out, oh, well, that's what heels do, right? That's what people do. You come to defense when it's your friend. So I didn't think it was subterfuge. Yeah, I didn't read it that way.
Go ahead, Jason. Now, follow up if you want, or move on.
Yeah, I took it the other way. I think that might be being a little bit too clever for their own good, because I sort of saw like Johnny have a smile on his face as if to say, haha, we fooled you all. Tommaso was always going to come out.
But what's the problem with that? Why is that too clever?
Because then then to play it out then. So the plan was to deliberately fake Johnny telling Tommaso not to come out, because they knew that backstage segment was going to be aired, and that Motor City Machine Guns would see it, and that the audience would see it. So is that what now? If they're going to, because sometimes it's like wrestlers don't acknowledge that the camera's on the backstage, or sometimes wrestlers are like, oh, I didn't see that, or whatever. Like, the whole backstage camera thing is very inconsistent.
So, but you're okay with what they did. Your issue is just the consistency of doing it in other times. Is that right or not? Because that's what Saturday Deviation says. I see it Jason's weight. Risks inconsistencies in other segments that aren't intending to use the cameras that way.
Correct.
But I think wrestlers can be caught sincerely saying something, and you can have heels, especially a Gargano Ciampa type, act, who are like, hey, we know we're being filmed. Let's act like we're going to have integrity. And you know what? If Gargano beats him clean, I didn't need anyone's help. But if Gargano gets in trouble, Ciampa, you know what you're supposed to do. We don't have integrity, but maybe we can. If I get in trouble, at least Saban won't be there because you're not going to be there. I mean, I don't know. I don't think everybody has to be super aware of the cameras if they happen to be filmed having a discussion. They don't have to be like overtly cognizant of it in some strategy. Sometimes they're just filmed and it's no big deal. But a heel going, we're filmed, let's use it to our advantage. I don't think that's inconsistent. I'm in the front of the line holding up a protest sign. If somebody says some devious plot in front of a camera and then don't want the babyfaces to hear it, and then the babyfaces aren't aware of it, and then the audience and in the crowd sees it on the big screen, the announcer see it on the big screen, but somehow the babyface doesn't know. Well, that's awful. That's hack booking. But I don't think that we're at risk of that. I think this is just heels taking advantage of the pattern of wrestlers being routinely, commonly filmed backstage as part of the production.
Yeah, so I agree. I think that heels should do that if it is established that Tommaso Ciampa and Johnny Gargano know they're being filmed, and they go out of their way to sort of fool the Motor City Machine Guns with that backstage segment, because they know that they are watching that and the audience is watching it. Obviously the audience is, then so be it. You know what I mean? And I think that's what the whole thing they're trying to do. Isn't that the story they're trying to tell, that they were sort of faking a feud with each other to lull the Motor City Machine Guns into a false sense of security, that Johnny Gargano was on their side, which means that, Ciampa pushing over Johnny Gargano in the ring in previous weeks and pretending, it was all pretend for this one particular moment. That's the story they're trying to tell, right?
I like that.
Definitely, yeah.
So that's the story. So the whole time they were acting just to get to this one point, which means that the backstage segments that they were feuding when they were, legitimately upset with one another, or Ciampa was upset, it was all fake, because they knew that footage was going to be seen by the Motor City Machine Guns and the audience. All right, You know what? If they want to do that, that's fine. Just make that narrative and make those rules consistent across everyone else.
But I think some people can be filmed and not be up to anything. They just happen to be filmed being sincere.
Right.
So I'm guessing, and I'm not saying there isn't something that you're thinking or that the average person listening is thinking of. I just don't know what we're at risk of right now because of this happening that will unravel the internal logic of what they're doing. if people are being sincere while they're being filmed and they know they're being filmed, and then you have people heels being insincere and using being filmed to their strategic advantage out of mind games and playfulness and for the thrill of it, or because it's a strategy that'll help them win. Either way, it's fine.
Yeah, I think the only inconsistency would be if someone just says, "Oh, I didn't see the camera when I said that," and yet the camera's literally right in their face. You know?
Yeah, I don't think Paul Levesque will oversee that.
No, they're not going to do that.
Yeah.
Jason, you've convinced me. I'll admit when I'm wrong, and I think you're right about what they were doing. So I'll take back my initial rebuttal of you. How about that?
Well, I don't. No, that's good on you, Chris. That's all right, buddy.
Yeah.
No, I don't. I don't know. I just. I think you know what I'm getting at, Wade.
Yeah.
And I think this is one of these things where it might be more of a big deal to me than you. Like we all have our little thing. We all have our little things that we sort of get annoyed at. You know.
I just if 2 months from now there's heels plotting and it's not part of the broad canon of knowledge and it's an invisible camera, that's awful. I just don't. I haven't seen that be a thing lately for WWE, where it's obvious that people are talking and they're unaware that the camera's there. I think the belief it's sort of like it's like Survivor. You're on an island, you don't acknowledge the cameras, but they're there filming everything you say and do. There's an honor code that if you say, "Hey, I've turned off my tracking device so my wife doesn't know where I'm going to be tonight, and I'm going to slip away from the bar and go meet my girlfriend who I haven't my side dish in the city," like they're not going to film that. That's like there's an honor code not to do that, and we're only going to put stuff on TV that's relevant. I don't know. I mean, I sort of think there's that vibe the way that it's filmed. Tony Khan told me on the eve of Dynamite's debut 5 plus years ago, we're never going to have an invisible camera on this show. That's one.
And I like that. That's one of the best. Well, that's a very good thing that he introduced a strategy or a rule.
Yes, but I think WWE has a consistency lately to what they're doing, which is we got cameras floating around backstage and they're filming them. I think the dumbest thing they do is air people doing nothing without any way of knowing something interesting is about to happen, and something always interesting happens where somebody walks up to the person. I'd rather they film the person who looks like they're on a mission. If I'm a roving cameraman backstage and my job is I just assume there's 4 camera people backstage at all times in the common area, not in the locker room, the common area. And they're just trying to track what's happening that's interesting. It's part of the playing field for them. Just like in Survivor, there's the camp, but there's also people who wander off and they get followed by the camera to go get water and they're filmed. That's just the common playing field for the show. And wrestlers know they're part of a show. And there's cameras roaming around. I just want the cameras to be filming interesting things, not uninteresting things. And I don't understand the decision to do that. I think it's one of the last irritants that Paul Levesque has not turned into an absence of an irritant. It's that habit. It's so it just blows my mind that they still do it. Like, oh, I'm on my phone and now you're going to film me. Why are you filming someone on their phone? Oh, because this person happened to walk in that was unforeseeable. It's so stupid. It drives me nuts. And it doesn't drive me nuts because it ruins the show. It drives me nuts because it's so easily fixable. Some of my gripes are not because they're destroying the people's enjoyment of the product. It's because it's so easy to fix. Just straighten your freaking tie. Like, make it better. And so, but back to the more relevant point, I think the common rule right now is we are as viewers to believe wrestlers know they're being filmed. But like on a reality show, sometimes it becomes invisible to you. You're so used to being filmed, you're not super self-conscious of it and looking at it. In fact, you're kind of told don't look at it.
And also the rule is that not only can the audience see what's going on, but the other wrestlers are watching the show too. But
if you explain a wrestler just arrives at the building, they said my rental car was late, or I got delayed in traffic, or I was dealing with a personal issue. Boom, they run into the building. They don't know what happened, and somebody yells at them, "Oh, I got to tell you something. No, I got to get to the ring." Like, give us as viewers that explanation for why somebody would be unaware of something that everybody else is aware of. You cannot let a week go by and do that. It has to be, in the show, and they have to just be shown arriving in a hurry. Disheveled from chaos in their life. So you can do it. Just go to that extent. Make polish up the product if you can.
All right, now all good points. Moving on to the 6-man tag. I mean, I really like the 6-man tag because you had the Bloodline getting Solo Sikoa's getting a pin. He's got a big match coming up on January 6th on Netflix, right? So I like that. You've got the 6-man tag, but I also like just seeing baby faces together, like one of the criticism might be a strong word, but with LA Knight, he's a bit of a loner, right? But I like the fact that he was teaming up with some people. He's teaming up with Andrade. There seems to be a bit of a mutual respect there. And you're getting Apollo Crews in there. So I always like to see baby faces together, you know, in the heels, because oftentimes we see like a bunch of heels together, but very rarely sort of like individual baby faces come together. So I kind of like that. And they also protected them by having Shinsuke Nakamura come out too, because he interfered in the match too. He attacked LA Knight. So Solo Sikoa got the victory. It continued to establish Shinsuke Nakamura as a threat. And you got a bit of screen time for Apollo Crews, and it also kept Andrade, you know, on screen too.
Mm-hmm.
In relation to the bigger point you guys were talking about, as far as what has led to, you know, a kind of a boom period. I mean, how brave was the decision for Cody Rhodes not to win the championship at WrestleMania 39?
And extend the story. Jason, we just might have lost our connection to you.
Oh, bummer.
Chris, well, maybe his signal restores itself. What do you think about how much did that add to? I think they could have told a story with him as winning it when he won it and line up challengers. And I mean, I think there's more than one way to tell a good story. But I think Jason's point is either that helped a lot or it was brave and it was risky, but it paid off more than people anticipated, and maybe more than if Cody had just won the belt and been, you know, the champion that soon.
Yeah. Well, one, I don't think we would have gotten main event Jey Uso had Cody won the belt at WrestleMania 39.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think he is a direct result of extending the Bloodline saga with Roman on top for that year. As Roman is fond of saying in several interviews, right? The high tide raises all ships, you know. And so I think him sticking around and staying on top was probably the right move for a lot of aspects of the business.
Yep. Let me see if Jason's back. Jason, can you hear us? Nope. Okay.
You're teasing us.
Let's. Oh, now he's calling back. Okay, so I think we can make this work. Oh, there's too many people there. Let's see. I don't know which one I have live. Jason, is this the good version of you live? Can you hear us? Nope. So let me bring the other version. There, Jason, you called in. Welcome. Can we hear you now? I still can't hear you.
We're so close.
Let's try the other one. Jason, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, something's up, Jason. Oh, now we can. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, you can hear me.
Cool. Yep.
This is a good version of me. It's not the bad version. All right, that's good.
All right.
Yes.
Nice.
The evil version.
Do you know you're on camera? That's the question.
Yeah.
I can tell I'm not. Yeah.
And are you standing?
Well, not on camera, but you know you're live and we can hear you. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. So yeah, I mean, the point I was raising, just I think that played
Cody
a major part. Yeah, Cody on the journey. Thought that was such a brave decision at the time.
Yep.
To make it, and
I
ended
think,
up paying up.
I think we are at a point where it's a really interesting conversation to have, and like we're deep enough into a boom period for them. Again, the metrics are different. This is about filling stadiums with high price tickets. It's not about setting cable ratings records. But I you know, cable viewership and TV viewership is so relative to the era you're in and the competition, how many people have cable, all that, and you just can't compare it to, you know, 25 years ago. But what you can is, are fans willing to part with their money and leave their house and go sit and watch you for a high price in large numbers? And that, I mean, that's where whatever AEW wants to do when they talk about their TV rights fees deal, good. I mean, it bought them a lifeline to try to get their house in order and have, you know, a second act to Tony Khan's launch of AEW, and this buys them time to come up with that. But WWE and their attendance is the hard evidence that what they're doing is pleasing the fans. That's not inertia like it was when Nitro was the inferior show to Raw, but they were still outdrawing Raw. I got my habit. It's not a habit to spend $300 to sit, you know, in the upper deck, and people are doing that right now. So, in AEW, it's not happening. So, I mean, that to me, that's the best indicator of a boom period, more than your TV rights fees or even cable, you know, viewership numbers, and certainly more than praise on social media and star ratings. I mean, like, WWE's got a boom period going on right now. And I think we're deep enough into it, Jason, to kind of like go, what happened here? Why? You know, what was it? And you know what? Speaking of AEW, I think they can thank Tony Khan. I think having competition Honestly, like that, I don't think we should that shouldn't be something I think of an hour later. AEW sparked WWE to get out of some bad habits. It inspired them. It motivated them. They're very motivated. I know people in WWE, over these last 6 years who've been very motivated because of AEW. So I think that's a big factor too, Jason.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%. I think, it's very easy to rip on Tony Khan for various things, but obviously introducing AEW has been a net positive for fans and driving WWE. I mean, the other thing that I think of is just coming out of the whole pandemic era and people, wanting to go to a live event and just get involved and be part of something, like that's obviously, I think that carried on a bit of momentum. And, also for me, I think a lot of fans knowing that it is run by someone different in Triple H and, the whole Vince McMahon era is gone. But I know we're not in the habit here of defending Vince McMahon, but the other thing that Triple H has going for him that Vince didn't, and I know it's a bit self-inflicted, but Triple H doesn't own the company, right? So when you're an owner of a company, you would know this, Wade, and anyone that owns a company, it's a whole different psychology and mentality. Triple H doesn't have that pressure on him, which allows him just to focus on one specific thing or a couple. If you're Vince McMahon, you've got so many things on your mind that that hundreds of thousands of employees are dependent on you. You've got all these other pressures. You don't want to let the momentum slip. You need to make massive decisions that are going to impact everyone and every little thing. Triple H doesn't have that pressure. So something has to be said about that. It's all right to rip on Vince McMahon and says, he might say, who's going to remember this or who's going to remember that. There's only so many thoughts he can have in his mind at one particular time. So not to have the pressure of owning an actual billion-dollar company, that's got to be a weight off. That's obviously something Triple H doesn't have to think about, and it's going to be helping him make smarter, creative decisions. I mean, it just makes logical sense.
Chris.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Jason, and I think it would be true if we didn't know that Vince McMahon did have people doing the business side of WWE, especially since it went public. Watching the Mr. McMahon documentary on Netflix, you get a sense for how differently Vince's mind seemed to work. And I wonder if his overabundance of intellectual curiosity got in the way of his ability to distill down the creativity into something both palatable and also beautiful from an artistic perspective, right? I wonder how different the pressure really is between Triple H and Vince McMahon.
Well, what do you think, Wade?
Got you on mute, Wade.
Chris, frame it for me because you said a lot there. What about Triple H and Vince specifically? What's the last thing you said?
Oh, that I wonder how much pressure is different between the two. The pressures that they have in their
that's role. Okay. I was trying to think if you're talking about the dynamic between Hunter and Vince and the pressure he felt working under Vince versus now alone, or if you mean the pressure that Hunter feels now versus what Vince felt back then. That's the only part that is sort of I'm not sure on.
Well, that's the question I'm asking, Wade. What is the difference? Like with Hunter has been the face of WWE and his responsibilities compared to Vince's, and overall what falls under their umbrella.
Yes. So okay, good. No, that clarifies it. So Levesque has a more narrow job description than Vince did, unquestionably. But when you say pressure, I think Vince felt a different kind of pressure and in a way less pressure because Levesque can be fired. He's being held accountable by other people. Vince wasn't. Vince had his own personal goals, but Vince he wasn't going to get fired. I mean, even under being public and with pressure from stockholders, Vince, it was his company and he made sure he was irreplaceable and he wasn't going to step aside. With Levesque, I think his mentality is I got to earn this job every week, every month, every quarter. It's a different kind of pressure. But with Vince, it's pressure to be a successful company and keep growing and and not have people say you're washed up and that you only had, that your best days are behind you. So I think with Levesque, it's a different kind of pressure. But the thing about Levesque is, I mean, I think he's had to ponder stepping away because of health and simply sort of pride regarding how Vince dealt with his wife and Vince's daughter, and the whole dynamic there. I think that, I more than think that. I think it's pretty obvious that he had to consider the possibility he wasn't going to have this job. Vince never did. And I think Levesque wants this job. He's worked his whole, I don't say he's worked his whole life for this specific job, but everything he's done in life has led to him being qualified for this job in a way that I say I don't think anybody else is. It's not that he's irreplaceable, but there's nobody who is just so clearly, a fan of the territory days, worked for a different company, became a main event star in the face of really stiff competition, not anointed to him. Had to scratch and claw to have the oxygen and the bandwidth to get TV time opposite of Steve Austin and The Rock especially. And on and on and on. And then working under Vince McMahon. He is just, his whole life has led to this moment. Nobody else has in the same way. So he has that going for him, which takes some of the pressure away. It's not like he's just a regular booker, like who in the territory days or whatever, WCW, they just rotated him every couple years. It's a different kind of pressure. But he also knows nobody else is as qualified in the life path that he is. So, but going back to my point, I think he's already considered what life would be like if he didn't have this job. And I think he's at peace with that. I think he'd be sad. I think he loves this job. But I also think he's considered it in a way that Vince hasn't, and he's prepared to be like, he's set for life financially, he and Stephanie, and they've got their daughters, and I think he could imagine life outside of this too. So in a way that takes some of the pressure off if you're okay with that and you're not worried about losing your house, and I don't think he is. So anyway, those are my kind of off-the-cuff thoughts now that I understand the question.
So I guess for me, like when we hear wrestlers talk about such a great environment and you can get time off and all the rest of it, and you mentioned it there briefly, Wade, surely what Triple H went through with his heart and everything, it changed the way that he probably thought about things. Is, some things are bigger than this. And as much as we love it, you got to spend time with your family. If you want time off, it's okay to request that, because I almost lost time with my family full time. And then you've got to factor in the loss of Bray Wyatt and all these things. I think it's obvious to say that certain things that have happened has created a more better environment for the wrestlers where they don't feel so bad to take time off, and there's a better work-life balance.
Yeah. Yep. Some people in the chat chiming in on this, Jason, real quick. CJ says, in a way that makes it harder for Triple H because he can actually be fired. And he can be fired, but like we're saying, I think he's like, well, if I was fired, here's the bright side. Where with Vince, there is no bright side. He can't be fired, but if WWE went out of business, I just don't know what he would do. Derek Mitchell says Triple H is comparable to Dana White in UFC, not the owner, but he's a public face of WWE. I think Paul Levesque and Dana White are real comparable in that way. Go ahead, Jason.
And there's just one more final point I wanted to raise, and it's more of a overall type of bigger point, but it gets to SmackDown moving to 3 hours, right? And I want to push back on an argument that some people raise, that they feel that WWE's success has had no real impact on AEW, and AEW should be doing better. Look, as someone who's followed wrestling for over 30 years, straight, like 34, 35 years, right? Still, as a hardcore fan as I am, to an extent, there's only so much wrestling I can watch per week, right? There is only so much. And if WWE are giving me what I want from a professional wrestling point of view, i.e. leaving a nice taste in my mouth, so to speak, I don't need AEW spoiling that for me. Or I don't need, if AEW are not, there's nothing that AEW can give me that I can't get in WWE. So my diet of professional wrestling is being fulfilled by this hot product. There's no need for me to watch AEW. So the fact that WWE is hot is a reason why I can see AEW's numbers going down or their ratings going down, because people are getting their professional wrestling fix from WWE. Just because WWE is hot doesn't mean AEW is going to be too. I'm getting enough from the premier competition. Why do I need to see a lesser competition if I'm getting what I already need? So this argument that, because WWE's hot, it means that AEW should be hot too. I don't agree with that. And I agree with the argument that because WWE's hot, I can see AEW's ratings going down. It's just, that's the way that I look at it.
Right. Yeah. I don't think there's a flat out rule that applies in all situations that everybody, the rising tide raises all boats. I think
no, it doesn't. It doesn't.
And WWE is cognizant of the fact that they are saturating the market. I mean, I don't think going to 3 hours is motivated by AEW, but I think they see it as a bonus that having Saturday's main events and NXT specials on weekends and NXT as a 2-hour show on the CW and now 6 hours of Raw and SmackDown combined and their busy PLE schedule with the major PLEs. I mean, they know it's crowding out the appetite for AEW. I mean, it just, if somebody's giving away free coffee on the corner and it's really good coffee, the coffee shop on the other side of the street, people don't need 2 cups of coffee in the morning. Well, some people do, but you know what I mean? Like they're not going to cross the street to go to something less familiar not that WWE's giving it away for free, but in a way they are, in the sense that if you already have these streaming services and cable, you're getting this super saturation of a product that you're familiar with and a brand that has gained or regained your trust and loyalty. Yeah, it makes it tougher for AEW. There's a big audience out there, and I think there's enough to go around. But AEW had a good week. I thought Wednesday was a step in the right direction, one of the better steps in the right direction for them this week compared to the last few months, and made me more optimistic about 2025 when I was pretty down on them just the day before on the flagship with Jason Powell. So, you can turn it around, but they got to stack weeks together and show that some of the things I'm extrapolating from what I saw Wednesday isn't happenstance, but a strategy and course correcting and all that. But still, you're fighting a tougher WWE now than you were in 2020, 2019.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the other factor that I sometimes think of, and I want to be conscious of my own bias, have WWE presented wrestling in a way that makes me feel like that is the only way professional wrestling should be presented. And if I come across another company that puts a different spin on it, that I'm kind of going to reject that because I've already been preconditioned to accept the way WWE do it. I mean, sometimes I criticize AEW, but then I don't lose fact of what they're working up against and what Tony Khan's working up against. And sometimes I feel like he cops unnecessary criticism because he's trying his best and trying to find his own point of difference. But you are working against an audience who probably feels that there's only one way to present professional wrestling, and if it's done in another way, it comes across inferior. I just think sometimes the criticism of him is a bit unfair. I think it's fair and unfair, but there's a lot of factors to take into account.
Yeah. Great. Chris, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, this question keeps coming up all through the night when I think about what they're doing right versus what they're doing wrong. Well, it's not so much a question as I keep coming back to this moment I had last week. So last Sunday, doing what I do for work, and a 65-year-old gentleman who's a member of my congregation comes by and says, "Did you catch the main event last night?" And I said, "Well, which main event?" And he said, "The one with the wrestlers." So here's somebody who has zero exposure to the market, sat down and watched effectively a PLE, who now knows that WWE is going to be on NBC. But if I said, "Do you watch AEW?" he wouldn't even know that company existed, right?
Yep.
So this leads me to this question that keeps going back: is there any other art form that we know of that has been dominated by one particular voice as much as professional wrestling has been dominated and shaped by WWE? And I just don't think there is another example that's comparable.
For a while, I would argue conservative news cable channel, Fox, was the dominant brand, and people didn't know there was Newsmax or what's the other one? I think there's another one out there that's like free, like on all the free streaming channels.
One or something like that.
Yeah, whatever. Like, so I mean, that came to mind, like that they were the dominant. Nobody knew there was an alternative. I watched my primetime Fox, whatever, so that came to mind. Because I mean, in sports, it's like people choose between the NBA and NHL, and the NFL's a juggernaut. so the NFL, sort of the obvious example. They sort of dominate the market, even with an XFL and a USFL over the years.
Right.
So that that obviously comes to mind. But I'm thinking outside of a sports genre.
Right.
Yeah, I can't think of anything else. If chat has any ideas, certainly can. But yeah, but generally speaking, UFC to a degree. Some people don't know other groups exist. Even Pride. I was more of a UFC guy than a Pride guy during Pride's peak years. I just was sort of brand loyal, and I might have had to do with what was carried on my cable or satellite system. But I was my time for MMA was more UFC. So yeah, I don't know. It's a good question. There's probably some other good examples out there. I don't think it happens in like big box stores. I think there's, for every Staples, there's an Office Depot or Office Max. There's Lowe's and Home Depot. There's Walgreens and CVS. There's grocery store competition galore. So I don't think it happens a lot in like stores, like retail.
Sure.
Yeah. Walmart, Target, Macy's,
Right.
Kohl's. Yeah. Jason, anything else you want to say before we move on?
I'll leave it there, guys. Thanks for your time, Wade and Chris. Merry Christmas to everyone there at the PWTorch staff and
Merry
all
Christmas,
the contributors
Jason.
and all the
Yeah,
listeners, and all the best for the new year. And I look forward to talking to you guys then. But yeah, thanks, Wade. Thanks for all the hard work you do. Just to reiterate everything. Obviously, I've been a member for a long time, been a fan of PWTorch. You're obviously the best that you do and everything. So, mate, congratulations on all your success, 25 years, and continue onwards and upwards.
Thanks, Jason. Always good hearing from you.
It's gotta feel good to hear that. Yeah.
It always is. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I can't hear that enough.
No,
Sean and Jason, great. Darrell says the NBA is that. Also the NFL when it comes to basketball and football, because they are sports, but they have their own lane. You only see comp in food stores, etc. So a little bit there. Chris, anything else from tonight's show you want to bring up?
I not featuring much of Cody other than the sort of backstage package pile driver piece. We just had a PLE where he did not appear at all, right, in Survivor Series. I'd like to see them feature him more than just in these fleeting glimpses, but I understand that's the story that they're telling.
That's the thing. This week especially, they wanted to write him off so he could just have a couple weeks off for the holidays before WrestleMania season, Netflix era kicks in. This was part of what WWE's doing well, which is giving wrestlers time off. And their schedules are just great for wrestlers now compared to 20, 30 years ago. So I think it's fine, and I think there is a risk, and I think they think about it, of Cody overexposure. You put Cody on TV without a purpose, and it's not great. Like, there's some people who just put him on TV every week. They're going to be great. Cody needs something to talk about. I don't think you want people looking at Cody going, what was that 5 minutes for? You know, and so they wrote him off with the angle after Sam's main event, but it was deliberately done to give him time off with his family. He's got very young kids at home and a wife, and he's got to recharge because he's not going to have much time to be home alone, because he is a workhorse for publicity for that company, and there's going to be a lot of demands on him. So, like I said, this is the least important show of the year. This is the least important SmackDown of the year. But Kevin Owens doing his thing. I liked, it's not my fault, and then he lists other people's fault. KO's great. KO's a guy you can put on TV, and it's always good.
Yeah, I love the winged eagle that is sticking around, right? That there's a story that's being told with that belt, which I think is amazing. The other thing that, not really necessarily related just to this show, but it felt more apparent to me tonight than perhaps other events. Have you noticed in the packaging, the videos that they're doing with the run up to Netflix, how much Triple H is being featured? It's his narration, but also his face, and it feels to me like an active attempt to move away from such close association of WWE with Vince McMahon, right? And in order to do that, you've got to actually have another face, right? And so I've seen some criticism that he is promoting himself, that it's all vanity, but I actually see it from a business perspective. You want to associate this business with a different face than the one that's currently under investigation for sexual misconduct. So
Paul Levesque answers to at least 5 people ahead of above him in the corporate structure. If they didn't want him to be on TV this much, if they thought it was just self-aggrandizement, And yeah,
right.
He wouldn't be the voice of Then Now Together Forever. He wouldn't be the guy driving up the headquarters in the big atrium, and he wouldn't be. I mean,
Right.
So does Levesque mind publicity? Of course not. We
Probably
watched his
not,
career. He was in the production truck going, well, I want a little more of me in this video, or I mean, he was very hands on, and it worked to his advantage. He was always around and made it work. But so I don't think he's like blushing. I think he likes being on TV, but it is an undeniably smart strategy to make him the corporate face of this brand. And it would be malpractice for him to be in a low profile right now because of the publicity for Vince. So, yeah.
But they're doing it so well, in my opinion.
Yep. Paul Levesque on NXT TakeOver is a little much sometimes. It's like, hey, but a little much, not a lot, too much. But there are times where it's like, do you really need the wrestlers talking about you? Oh, thanks, Coach Hunter. You
right.
Like, I mean, but it was brand building. It was, he was building a brand for this moment in a way. Yeah. All right, Chris, I'm going to wrap up there. Unless you have strong feelings to add anything.
No.
Yeah. So let's wrap up there. Thanks everybody for joining us. Good chat discussion. I tried to get in most, but I know I didn't get all the good comments there. Good to hear from Jason and Sean. So yeah, thanks everybody. Check out the flagship with Jason Paul and me earlier this week. We talked a lot of WWE at the beginning and then some AEW at the end. I also did the AEW post show. And if you want to hear Tony Khan's conference on ROH Final Battle, that is up on the Blue Logo Show, the Wade Keller Pro Wrestling Podcast. So please, everybody, subscribe to what we do. First of all, if you're watching us on YouTube, please like this show, comment below, subscribe to our channel. If you are listening to us on the podcast side of things, take time to give us a 5-star rating and leave a positive review for what we're doing. As always, search PWTorch in your podcast app. Subscribe to the PWTorch Daily Cast. The Acknowledging WWE episode with Javier and Jason D from Australia. It will be going up tonight with a lot of comments, including, is Cody heading into dangerous waters? Is one of the hooks for this week's Acknowledging WWE. That's a WWE themed PWTorch Daily Cast weekly show. So check that out if you haven't yet. And of course, subscribe. Search Wade Keller. Subscribe to the Red and Blue Logo shows, the flagship and the post shows, and check out PWTorch.com every day. See what our writers are contributing, like Chris, and our news. We got ratings. We try to give you stuff you won't get anywhere else. We're not chasing down the SEO stuff like every other site. So many other sites are that just show up on your feeds. You gotta come to us, and hopefully we'll make you think and add some perspective you won't get elsewhere. And then join us every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday live on YouTube, or download the shows. And if you're not a VIP member, again, we encourage you to do that at pwtorch.com/govip for our YouTube viewers. The graphics up on the screen, pwtorch.com/govip. That gives you full details on all the ways to subscribe, which includes Patreon, using your Apple account to subscribe. You can search PWTorch VIP within Spotify and get a 7-day free trial. Lots of ways to go. Really cool stuff. You won't be able to take in everything that we offer on a weekly basis, much less 35 plus years of archives. Right. But there's always something there on a rainy day. And if you're curious, we've got a really good website layout for you to just go one layer after another into our history. So check it out. Chris, thanks once again. Great having you on.
And thank you.
Merry
it's
Christmas.
Blast.
Yep. Happy New Year, everybody. And we'll talk to y'all. Happy Hanukkah. Just spend time with your family and appreciate them. And don't take them for granted. Even if you're annoyed by the schedule and the travel and the logistics, it's like, there's this year is going to be unique to any other year that you have with your family and your friends, and appreciate it, and get everything positive you can out of it, and realize come January 10th, you'll be recovered enough to look back on the good stuff. So make sure you're
good word, man. It's a good word.
Yep. All right. Thanks everybody. We'll talk to you next time.
Peace.